by Sarah Elizabeth Kellner. This is a free pattern available on Ravelry. Window Cat is a simple pattern knit in the round from the bottom up. Tail and paws are knit separately, also in the round, and seamed to the body. Finishing touches would be the eyes, nose, and whiskers, and can be embroidered on or embellished with buttons, fabric, etc. There's no end to the ways that this cat can be personalized. Now I have my beginning materials laid out here. I have my size 4 knitting needle for doing magic loop. I also have a stitch marker, and I have 2 balls of yarn. So to begin, we are going to cast on 78 stitches. I am going to start with the blue. Okay, so now we're going to cast on 78 stitches to begin. I am going to do a long tail cast on, so I've pulled quite a bit of my blue yarn. And I start off with my slip knot. I wrap the yarn around my finger, like so, makes an X. I hold the X in place with my thumb. Pull the loop off the tip of my finger, take my working yarn, push it through the back of the loop, pull that loop up, and it looks kind of like a funky alien. I'm going to pull on his legs. That's my slip knot. Now I will stab my needle through, stab it through the slip knot and choke up on the yarn, but I still want to keep my loop kind of loose. See, there's space there, because you don't want your cast on too tight, or else you're going to have problems in the end. Number one, it will be very tough to knit your first row of stitches, but then also you have like a funky pulled in tight edge on one end of your knitting, and that is never a good thing to have. So for this long tail cast on, go under your thumb, over the finger, through this window, and then off. Under the thumb, over the finger, through the window, and off. And we keep doing this until we have 78 stitches. Okay, so I have all 78 of my stitches cast on, and if we take a look here, I have many inches of extra needle cable, and I want to make this join to knit in the round. So I'm going to do magic loop. So to do magic loop, I'm going to take some of my stitches here, and then I'm going to fold my cable and pull out a section of the loop. Then, making sure everything is not terribly twisted, I'm going to fold my cable again. I am not counting these stitches, by the way. I am just straightening them out along the cable and folding my loop, because we are going to knit in the round for 6 inches according to our directions. I want to show you how I join in the round for magic looping, so you can do this on your own. Let's get some of these strings out of the way. Have my yarn in a yarn bowl so it doesn't flop all over the place. Okay, so I'm gonna lay our yarn out on the table, lay our work out on the table, our cast on edge, making sure it is not twisted, because that would be no fun to have a Mobius going up the middle of your tube, which is supposed to be your cat body. So this is our working yarn. Here, let me pull this out of here. Working yarn. Okay. This is my cast on edge. Making sure it's not twisted. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. It's okay, it's knitting. We got a while. Be patient with yourself. All right, so now I've got my edges not twisted. I'm gonna pick this up and just double check again. Good, does not look twisted. And I'm gonna zhuzh my stitches close to the needle points. And I have a stitch marker handy, which I am going to slip on to my right hand needle. And see, I have my tail and my working yarn together. Now all I'm going to do to connect in the round is I'm going to go ahead and insert my needle into the first stitch on the left, and with the tail and working yarns held together as if they are one, I'm going to knit the first 4 stitches. I'm pulling the first stitch a little snug so I get a nice tight join. Okay, so this 1, 2, 3. Now the main thing is to remember on the following round to knit both of these strands together as if they are one stitch. You don't want to do them individually because then you will magically add 4 stitches to your 78 stitches. So now I've got the first 4 stitches knit with the working yarn and the tail held together, so I can drop the tail. See it? Drop tail. And with my working yarn only, I can continue to knit. Pretty spiffy. So now I just go ahead and then knit to the end of the stitches on my left hand needle shaft here. And then we'll get to the big gap in the loop, like the big looping part. So just to show what this looks like, it looks like it's got ears. See, here's my magic loop here. Here's my magic loop here. If you are doing this at home and you also are doing magic loop, I imagine your work will look something similar to mine. Remember, this is a window cat, a knitted window cat. You could make your window cat look like a cat you own. You can make it look like a cat you used to have, or you can make a fantasy cat. You can have a rainbow cat. It doesn't matter. You can make it however you want. That's the beauty of knitting and making your own stuff. You get to be the main creative decision maker, and there's no knitting police, and no one's going to tell you you can't have it look a certain way. If you want to put a unicorn horn and wings on your cat, by all means you could do that too. It's all up to you. And if you are being frustrated by your knitting at all, sometimes you just got to put the knitting down and walk away. And remember, be patient with yourself, especially if you are just learning and you're new. Everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and I've been knitting for a long time. So now we're at the end. So I have this big gap. So now we're going to zhuzh this wire. So I am pulling on the loop in my wire, which is connected immediately to this part of my knitting needle. Because the idea is I want to pull the knitting needle shaft back so the stitches are actually on the shaft of the needle. I know it sounds funny, we're always talking about shafts and knitting. Okay, so now that I've got the left hand needle is all loaded up with stitches, I take my needle in my right hand that has the stitch marker on it, and I pull this out. This is going to create a loop, but I want to keep the loop on the opposite side. I want to keep this loop while I pull this wire. So don't pull it too hard that you lose your second loop, because then you might have an issue. If you do pull it too hard where you lose your second loop, like say you go like that, whoops, what happened to my second loop? It's okay, it's not the end of the world. You can always bend the loop again and pull the cable back through those stitches. It's not a big deal. Whoops, just make sure you don't pull all your stitches off your needle, then you have to go pull them up. Okay, so we have a loop over here, we have extra cable. Now taking our knitting needle, and see, looping it around. This is the loop part of the magic loop. Put my needle into the stitch as if to knit, and I grab my working yarn. And do you see how it's got a big gap here? This could potentially make what we call a ladder, and you'll have strands like this that go all the way up the side of your knitting. To eliminate that, or to keep that from happening, when you knit the first stitch, and you see I've got yarn wrapped around my fingers like so to keep tension in my hands. When you knit this first stitch, pull through and pull that first stitch snug. I've got that pretty tight, it's taut. Pull that snug so you don't get a funky ladder. Now, all you need to do is to continue knitting around. Okay, so now we are back to the big gap again. Making sure that that your knitting is not twisted, because we're still on round 1, believe it or not. Okay, so again, I'm going to pull the cable, which is attached to the left-hand needle, until the needle has slipped into the stitches. Okay, so now I've knit my first round. Now we're back to this gappy business. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to pull on the cable till my left-hand needle slides back into the stitches. And then I pull the tip of my right-hand needle, and see I'm holding on to my knitting like so. So all of my stitches don't just fling off of the end of my needle. So I pull the right hand needle, keep a loop at the bottom, and now I have this extra cable. Now I can turn, insert my needle as if to knit, make sure the yarn is behind the work. And remember, this first stitch, I want to go ahead and I want to pull it snug, pull it nice and snug, so that way it eliminates any possible ladder. See, nice and snug. And then I can go ahead and knit to the end of my round, which is where the stitch marker is. Okay, now we are back to the beginning of our round. Now, some of you might want to do stripes and change color. Really easy to change color. We will change color now. So I'm gonna grab the working yarn, working end of my complementary color, which is this. This is my complementary color, hooray! Okay, so I wanna knit my first round with my new color. So you see I have inserted my needle into the first stitch as if to knit. And then I take my complementary color, here it is, and see I've made like a U, I've made a U. And I'm gonna take this U, put it on my needle, hook it on, pull it through and knit. So all I've done is just started to knit with the new yarn. I want to remember to leave myself a 6-inch tail, which I can weave in later. And now I can just continue on my round with my new yarn. And as you continue around, you go around and around and you change colors. When you get to your stitch marker, you can just twist the two working yarns around each other as you carry them up the inside of your finished piece. Now we're just going to knit to the end of this needle. I am almost to the end of my round, and I want the next row in the main color, or my first color, whoops, which is this blue. So now I put my needle in and put the orange over the blue. You see, take this, put it over the blue, pick up my blue yarn, pull the orange out of the way, put a little tension on it so it stays out of the way. And then I just begin knitting the new round with the new color. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so I will see you next time when we have 6 inches of our cat body completed. Thank you. Happy stitching.